We Still Bloom, a tribute to Gwendolyn Brooks. We still bloom. We claim room. We again begin. We still grin. We don't wait. We make fate. We find jewel. We real cool. For generations, justice has meant punishment or progress on paper. But real justice requires repair, returning what was taken and building what should have been there all along. This is What If, where we imagine a world as it could be and meet the people building it now. I'm Daydriane, and I'm glad you're here. Today we're asking, what if justice actually meant repair? What if we measure justice by how well we make things right? Before we hear from Robin, I want to pause on a few terms you'll hear: reparations, restoration, and something called the guarantee of non-repetition. Reparations is the process of repair for communities harmed by systemic injustice. It includes financial restitution, policy change, and the restoration of dignity and culture. Restoration means rebuilding what was broken. And the guarantee of non-repetition is the commitment to change laws and systems so that the same harm can't happen again. So what does it take to make this what if real? Today, we are joined by Robin Rue Simmons, the founder and executive director of FirstRepair, a national organization that supports communities in advancing local reparations. She previously served as an alderman in Evanston, Illinois, where she led the country's first government-funded reparations initiative. Robin, how do you tell the story of what you do and why you do it?
Well, first, thank you very much for having me. I'm really inspired by the work that you're putting out. The work that I do is repair and justice. It is work that evolved from over 25 years of service in public service, in business, and in advocacy, fighting for the life circumstances of Black people. My village, specifically the Fifth Ward of Evanston, the historically segregated part of Evanston. And over years of advocacy for inclusion and Black business opportunity and home ownership and building wealth through various ways and our overall well-being, in 2019, my work evolved to be defined as reparations. It was very clear to me that reparations was the appropriate legislative response to the terror and uninterrupted plunder that we experience hyperlocally in cities like Evanston and across this nation. And so now that I've retired from office, I'm able to do the work outside of government, but in partnership with governments that are ready to do what is right and just. That's usually governments that have already established a commitment to equity and inclusion and acknowledgement of Black folks. So that first form of repair and acknowledgement they're already doing. And they're ready to put some action behind their words and get to tangible redress. And that is the difficult and protracted process of reparations. It's a privilege to be able to do the work with so many inspiring leaders, many elders that have carried this work without recognition, without compensation for many, many years. And now there is a new emerging group of leaders that are carrying on their legacy of work. And I'm just grateful to do the work.
Thank you so much for that. So I kind of want to look back into how that work came to be in Evanston, it being the first city in the U.S. to implement reparations. So looking back, what do you think made that possible?
Well, I called the question, and I'm given a lot of credit for the work because I called the question. I had the revelation to advance the work, but it was possible because we had a city of leaders that believed in doing what was right. We didn't have a blueprint. We really didn't even have a precedent because there's very little example of hyperlocal reparations in this way. And it was possible because we had a body of legislators, the 80th City Council, my colleagues on City Council that believed in it. But first and foremost, the residents of Evanston. We're talking about the stakeholders for first, Black folks. But in addition, our allies. We live in a multiracial democracy in Evanston, and let's just say most communities are going to be looking to get this legislation passed with allies and non-Black folks. So it was important that they believed in uh, the work ahead, that they were willing to learn, to understand how reparations is different than ordinary public policy. They were willing to work with folks they had not worked with before, invite in national experts so that we can be better informed on what are the actual best practices of reparations and how is it different than advancing other policy. And so it really was a community effort, the one that was supported by our elected officials as well as our public administrators as well. That was important. It's
Mm.
also important to acknowledge that Evanston has a history of progressive values, being among the first to advance affordable housing and school desegregation and other important civil rights that have passed in this nation. But reparations is an advance of the work that we've been doing already.
Yeah. And so a lot of times when people talk about reparations, it's really just talking about money or the transaction that's happening, but your work is a lot bigger than that. So how do you explain what reparations really means?
You're right. Even when I entered into the reparations conversation, I only had a very narrow view of what remedy is. At that point, you really heard about some form of compensation when you hear about the Japanese internment or
Mhm.
Holocaust or even land back with indigenous people. But I quickly learned the international standards and 5 forms of reparations, which includes the compensation and restitution, which we hear about all the time, but there's also guarantee of non-repetition or cessation, and that is policy reform. Where would we be even if we did get that 12 or 14 trillion dollar redress bill if we don't address the racist policy that keeps us racially divided?
Yeah.
And when we look at satisfaction, we're looking at how do we at least acknowledge our people, acknowledge the truth in our history, restore the dignity of our people by restoring our culture and giving us access to it as well. Rehabilitation is an area that we're seeing many communities really demand, thinking about the trauma that we experience as Black people, both the lived experience of trauma and that which we have inherited in our DNA through transgenerational epigenetics. And so the more that I have learned about reparations, and I have learned, quite honestly, about myself as a Black woman and
Mhm.
the heritage and culture that's been stripped away from me, the more I lean more into my own healing and my own self determination. How can I work with my community through group economics and other types of shared models so that we can strengthen ourselves, we can multiply our dollar, we can heal ourselves through knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, and also various forms of healing, whether it be food or our understanding, our relationship to the sun, moon, and stars, and so on. I
Mhm.
mean, there's just been so much that's been stripped away, and learning that has improved my leadership and my understanding of what full repair is.
Yeah. Is there any stories or any examples that stick out to you about the fuller picture of repair, what that looks like, maybe with yourself or people that you've worked with?
Well, a couple come to mind. I'll share one with myself. It was my work in reparations that led my curiosity to what are my origins. It didn't start
Mhm.
here in Evanston, Illinois. I know at least it went back to Fulton, Missouri, and Gunnersville, Alabama. It went back to West Africa before that. And so through African ancestry DNA tests, I learned that my foremother was from what's now Guinea-Bissau, more specifically a Balanta woman. And I was able to travel to the Balanta village in Guinea-Bissau and connect with my people there, and what it did for my understanding of me and my values and what drives me and what is possible and how empowered I felt that I could say, I have an identity outside of this place. It improved my patience. It helped me understand even more so how harmed we are through the institution of slavery, having more grace for our people, where we may look at each other as an enemy,
Yeah.
recognizing that those are behaviors that were embedded in us during a period of terror, and some of us had not escaped. So it's really rich for me, and I carry that culture with me as well. I'm actually leaving for Accra, Ghana in a couple of weeks for an
Wow.
ancestor celebration. So it's allowed me connection to the continent that has really given me balance and stability and beauty that I didn't have before this. And then I'll mention another beautiful story is really the story of what will be over 600 Evanstonians that receive reparations. Being a daughter of Evanston and a product of this village, I don't know when I will be able to fully explain being part of an effort that acknowledge to our elders, my family members in some cases, that we acknowledge that we were harmful as a city, that we had discriminating and racist practices. We want to acknowledge that in word and in deed. And in this initial down payment of, in our case in Evanston, a $25,000 direct benefit. So to see residents, especially in their 80s, sometimes in their 90s, I've met residents over 100 years old in Evanston
Wow.
that felt they would certainly never receive an apology. They would definitely not receive any type of acknowledgement or policy change. And there's no
Yeah.
way in the world they believe that they would receive a cash or other type of direct benefit directly from public administrators and their city government. And so that's giving my community great hope. It's given us more voice. It helps restore our sense of place. It has increased our support overall for Black businesses, Black leadership. It has given more attention to Black home ownership and other ways of building wealth and accessing education. There's been so many peripheral wins in this reparations work, including the return of a school to our historically Black community. And I could go on and on and on. You see the direction that I'm going in, but the $20 million that's been committed is
Mm.
fantastic. It is incredible. It's 20 million more than anyone thought was possible. But the value add that is not being measured in the hearts and mind work that's happened for our neighbors that are not Black, and how that heart and mind work is translating into institutional change, policy change, community relations, and so on.
Yeah.
Just look forward to figuring out, some social scientists will figure out how to measure that. That is a goal that I have, that we can measure that and report on it. So folks
Mm.
don't feel like it is that check alone, or it is only closing the racial wealth gap is the only form of reparations, but that we
Mm.
can see that these other value adds to repair and other forms of reparations will get us to close the racial wealth gap. Because once we're here, people, we, may have different consumer habits.
Yeah.
We may value education differently. Our demands will be different. Our priorities will be different. And so I have learned that the check and the cash benefit, no doubt, is important and is due. But the other forms have been really beautiful and enlightening to learn more about and to
Yeah.
be part of.
That makes me think about, in the context of repair, in the context of healing, kind of the moment that we're in right now, where maybe for a lot of people, those kind of emotional wounds are being opened again. And maybe the possibility that they thought they had is diminishing a bit. So I want to know how you're feeling about this moment and what feels most urgent to you.
Well, I feel like I've been living in this moment as long as I've been conscious. So it's a lot
Mm.
visible now.
Mm-hmm.
There is less hiding of it. It's almost been validated and endorsed with our highest office and the leadership of our current president. So what has been most important to me really my priorities, and I'm sure this is not the answer that you've been looking for, is leaning into my family and my community right now. Just really finding the healing, the grace, the information, inventorying our resources, like
Yeah.
sort of mapping what our future is, and what success looks like, and how do we attain it, how do we sustain, how do we make sure that we are organized as a community. And that's what I've been doing. I have so much respect for local government and belief in local government, and especially communities like Evanston that are home rule. Some states are home rule. We have quite a bit of purview. So
Yeah.
Evanston was able to pass reparations legislation where it's languished in Congress for over 30 years since this was introduced in 1989. And so my household, my block, my village, my city has been my priority as of late, because I do believe that the more localities do this work, and we synchronize our effort. And so that's what we're doing. I'm very focused on my own community while also hopefully inspiring other communities to see themselves in Evanston. Like, we're not an outlier. We're not unique. We're not a unicorn. We
Yeah.
have same elements in our community and every other community. And so that's what I try to share as I go to now over 100 localities in the United States is, who is your legislative champion? Who is your, Black historian, whether it is a formal historian like ours, Robinson, who is an archivist, or someone that is the keeper and has oral history to share? Who are your allies? Who is your legal expert that can help you understand what type of laws are viable and who can prepare for a defense? In the case of Evanston, we're in the midst of a lawsuit right now from a conservative party.
Mm.
And then, where are your resources? Where are your food banks and your clothing pantries and your rental assistance and your housing support? And how can young people mobilize to help the elders with their snow removal and their yard work? And just really thinking about how we care for each other has been a priority for me, while also making sure that I encourage folks to vote. And we can be discouraged, and we have a lot of right to have some grievances against both parties, including the Democratic Party. But the fact is, one can be more harmful than the other. And I've been really, for the last really several years, putting emphasis on voter participation and how we
Mm.
can achieve the society that we desire through having the right legislators in office.
Yeah. I think you have a really beautiful view of it, and I think because of the support and because of the community that you've had, you've been able to maybe sustain that positivity, I would say. I think a lot of people that don't have that don't have. So, if you could invite people to imagine a world that is fully committed to repair and fully committed to justice, what would you ask them to see or feel or believe?
I would ask them to believe that all things are possible.
Mm.
I believe that sometimes we defeat ourselves because we have given up on hope. And all things are possible. And if we really look at where we're at today, and this is certainly not an excuse, but look at, if we did not have hope on the plantation, and if we did not have hope during Jim Crow era, and if Rosa didn't have any hope that anything could change from her, act of defiance and not getting off of the bus, and what it did to really activate the activities around civil rights, we would not see the progress that we have today. So I would encourage folks to lean into hope, lean
Mm.
into your faith if you are a person of faith, but definitely lean into hope and community, not isolate. And remember that it takes work. So grievances on social media without an action offline is noise, right? Um, Although we can organize very strategically, online, but that action that happens offline is what is important. really
Mm-hmm.
having a call to action, whether it is sharing a meeting link for a council meeting or inviting folks to a Black club meeting or sharing a mutual aid resource or whatever it is. Be hopeful and be active would be my words of advice in this day.
So we always close each episode with a what if. And so what if that we have today is, what if justice actually meant repair in policy and practice and in our daily lives?
Well, we would have achieved, our goals. What if justice looked like repair in policy, in practice, and in our daily lives? We would be safe as Black people. We would not experience terror from a traffic stop, possibly. As Black women, we would not be concerned that our jobs or resources
Mm,
would be eliminated. As Black children, we would know that we have access to education and safe neighborhoods, right? As elders, the same. We would know that we would have an opportunity to age in place and be well and, reflect on a beautiful lived life. And so we're working towards that. We're we're far away from it. Our racial gaps seem to um, be widening, right? That's what happened in Evanston when I called the question for reparations. It wasn't that we weren't really recognized. Evanston is probably award winning for its diversity, equity, and inclusion, but still had near $60,000 household income gap, 13-year life expectancy difference,
mm,
incredibly troubling over policing, particularly in the marijuana space, but overall as well. And so even the best communities among us, those that are in Illinois, giving out checks. To date, we've given out about $6.5 million in direct benefits
wow.
to residents. It's incredible, right? We have moved
Yeah.
beyond technology, but even our city still is not getting it right.
Yeah.
We must remain hopeful and we must remain active.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your vision with us. And I thank you all for listening. We'll be back next time with a new question and new answers.
Awesome. Thank you.
This is What If, a podcast by Common Futurists. What If is hosted and produced by me, Daydriane Chapman. Cover art is by Kat James. Music is by Sam Barsh and Luna Ray. For more What If content, follow us on Instagram at Common Futurists. The future starts in our imagination and in our inbox. Send your thoughts and dreams to whatif@commonfuture.co.